with him in this regard. So if anyone was here today and present at the
Recording in
Jummah khutbah
progress.
that Brother Farhan gave, you heard about many of the different things that he was talking about. And subhanAllah, those who are involved in counseling can truly say that he was 110% spot on in terms of what he said and the issues that people are facing in our time. So it's very, very important to attend such programs and keep the marriages alive and afloat. Because again, many people are just resorting to the automatic solution that they have in their mind, which is the solution of divorce, without going to other things beforehand. So just before we start the program, wanted to also mention that you can see some papers that are around on the walls that have QR codes. We have the Slido that is set up. So anyone who would like to ask a question, you can put your phone on the QR code and you'll be able to ask a question anonymously on there. We will get the questions over here. After we are done, inshallah, Brother Farhan will be giving a presentation and then we'll say a couple of words as well. And then we will go to the Q&A. So we'll try to answer as many as we can. Whatever we cannot answer today, inshallah, we'll do our best, to answer them another time as best as we can, inshallah. So we did I know Brother Farhan is deserving of an introduction, but we don't have too much time. But he is, mashallah, the founder of Ihsan Coaching, who they have, various coaches, various counselors and therapists who are employed through this organization, and people around the entire country have utilized this service. So I wanted to give, inshallah, the mic to Brother Farhan, and we can begin his presentation in this regard.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي رب يسر ولا تؤسر وتمم بالخير. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First and foremost, Jazakumullahu khairan for inviting me to your community once again. And Jazakumullahu khairan for actually being here for this important topic. We could talk about marriage over and over, and it still would not be enough, because we learn from the Prophet ﷺ when he says, An-nikahu nisfuddin, that your marriage, nikah, is half your religion. And we'll see today why it's so important and what happens when, people do not take their marriages very seriously, when they do not learn what marriage is all about, and when they don't work on their marriage as well. Just before I start, I just want to give a little introduction of Ihsan Coaching, because yes, I'm here, alhamdulillah, but we have a great team, and alhamdulillah, everything we do is online, completely remote, confidential. And I would say, and we have people from all different backgrounds. We have Arabic speakers, we have Urdu speakers, we have, people from Afghanistan as well, mashallah. We have, everybody born and raised here as well. So, just go onto our website. If you know somebody that's struggling, women, males, it's just not marital. We also see individuals. There's something for everyone to, how do we improve our lives? How do we better ourselves? And the more we work on ourselves, the more society benefits as well, because now we could do more, right? Sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish to, so that you could do more for the society as well, right? If you work on your mental health and you work on yourself. So getting back to this topic, right? Keeping marriages alive and why this is so important. I just had a call this week, just on Tuesday, I believe it was, where a woman called me up and she said that, I really want to utilize your service. I really want to come in, but my husband, he does not want to work on our marriage. He says that it's a you problem. You're the issue, not me. And, it's not always women that call and say that I want help. Sometimes it's the men. Men call, but then the woman doesn't want to come. The wife doesn't want to come. Irrespective of gender, the whole point, what I'm trying to say is that, people, they want to get the help. They want to work on their relationships, but the spouse is a deterrent. They always think it's the other person. It's the other person's fault. And we have to realize that it takes two to tango, right? It's not one person or the other. It's both people in this relationship that have to work together in order to solve whatever is going on. So it's not a form of weakness to get help. It's a form of strength, right? The stronger we are as a couple, the more we could tackle together. And if we have children, who's going to be benefiting? They are the ones that are going to be benefiting the most. So this is why it's so important to get the help that we need and to learn about what we can do. So, I want to start off by talking quickly about the collapse of marriage. Why is this so important? Why do we need to focus on focus on working on our marriages? Because what we're seeing today is that unfortunately 1 out of every 3 Muslim couples are getting divorced. 1 out of every 3 Muslim couples. Now, I'm not here to look down upon anybody, and we should never look down upon anybody that actually been through a divorce, because we know that some marriages are just not going to work out. We all have family members that have been divorced, right? I don't think there's anybody in this room that could say that they don't know anybody or have a family member that's not been divorced. But the thing why I'm so passionate about this is because working in this field for 10 plus years, I truly believe 90% of issues that I see are really workable. They're solvable. But the problem is our egos come into place, and it does not allow us to work on the issues. It does not allow us to fix it and fix ourselves and make sure that we can move on as a couple. So there's 5 main reasons for marital discord. What are they? Well, finances, sexual intimacy, interests, what I like, what you like, family and friends, and in-laws. So I mentioned earlier in the khutbah, and I'm not going to go too detailed again, but 40% of marital discord is caused by other people, family and friends and in-laws. And what I tell people is that you have to protect your marriage. You have to protect your marriage. And the way to protect your marriage is by not telling everyone everything that's happening in your relationship, right? Only go to those people that actually can help, right? Like your imams or a counselor or someone. But when you tell your family, when you tell your friends, what happens is they're subjective and not objective. What does that mean? Your friends and family are going to take the side of the person who they're closest to. So my side of the family is going to take my side. My wife's side of the family is going to take her side. And when you often hear their family says, "Chor dosko, leave them. You don't need them," right? We could get you remarried, and this is very unfortunate. Instead of trying to, mend the relationships, people are trying to break off the relationships. I knew a person recently. He was going through marital issues with his wife, and his mother kept telling him, "Don't worry, I could get you married to a second wife. I could get you married again. You don't need this woman." And they have 2 kids. This is very unfortunate. What you think is just as easy just to break it off? Those kids are going to be dealing with the repercussions. The husband and wife are going to be dealing with the repercussions. Instead of saying, go to counseling, go get the help you need, the mother is telling her, leave them. Another case that I had where the woman, she wanted to leave the marriage. And so the parents, they said that it's your marriage. Do whatever you want. You want to leave? Go ahead. If you want to stay, go ahead. I mean, this is not the advice that we should be giving. Again, when I found out about their issues, it's very solvable, very solvable. So these are things that we need to be helping, not being a deterrent. So what's happening today is that couples, they're not working on their marriages, right? Everybody thinks it's the other person's fault. And they say, well, I'm perfect and you're the problem. And so what's happening is that they're saying you go individually and fix yourself. Now there's an issue with this. What is the issue? When you work individually, the thing is, okay, how can you change yourself? But again, it takes 2 to tango. So I could change myself, but the reality is now, how are you going to change yourself? What are you going to do about the situation? And so the other one person who changes itself, obviously what's going to happen is they're going to feel like this is unfair. This is not right. I have to make all the changes. And then over time, what's going to happen is they're going to stop. They're just going to say, you know what? I give up. I quit, because it's all the pressure and all the burden is upon me. And so this is where we have to step up together and realize that, look, we have a long life ahead of us, inshallah, whatever Allah wills, right? But the reality is, if we see ourselves together for 50, 60 years, whatever it might be, then why don't I just want to make this very peaceful for both of us? Why don't I have that higher standard for us? So, before we get into how do we make these marriages work, how do we keep this marriage alive? The last thing I want to just say is that there's no guarantee that the next marriage will work, right? We always think that the grass is greener, that, okay, don't worry, I'll find somebody else, and then now that marriage will work. But statistically speaking, if we look at it from pure statistics, right? If a person were to get divorced, if they were to get remarried, they have a higher chance that the next marriage won't work, right? Statistically speaking. Why? It's because they already know what it feels like to get divorced, so they're not afraid of it anymore. So what I tell people is that, and I said this in the Jummah khutbah, but I just want to reiterate this, is that you're not looking for the perfect person. There's no such thing as perfection other than the Prophet ﷺ. You're looking for the most compatible person. And in compatibility, that means that there's going to be differences. There's going to be things that we do not agree upon. And that's okay. And we'll talk about how do we solve these differences together. But, our spouse will have about 80 to 85% of what we're looking for. They might not have that 15 to 20%. But when you go looking for that, and you might find that, you realize that you forgot the 80 to 85%. And now you're left with what? Just 15 to 20, and you're not going to be happy in there either. So it's better that we work on our marriages, because the average divorce costs about $5,000 or even more if you talk to lawyers. I know people that spend $60,000, $70,000, $100,000 on a divorce. How much I'm just giving you our prices. I don't know how much other people cost, but how much does it cost? $400 for 4 sessions? Even one meal, you go out somewhere, it's over $100. But this is working on something that's going to last you for a lifetime. This is working on something that you're going to be happy inside your own home. The food you eat, yes, you taste it, you're happy for that moment and second, but this is a long-term happiness. So, all right, how do we work on this relationship then? How do we keep this relationship alive? So I already came here one time, so I'm just going to recap quickly about something that we talked about previously. And then we're going to talk about, managing conflict. So last time I came, we talked about that there's 2 types of relationships. There's the master relationship and the disaster relationship. Now, master relationship does not mean that you and your spouse will always see eye to eye. It does not mean that you guys will always agree upon every little thing. And that's totally fine. You don't have to agree with your spouse upon every single thing. See, in a friendship, what happens is that we will disagree upon certain things, and that's okay. And we say, you know what? We agree to disagree. And the whole point of this is that things do not escalate, right? Think about when you were talking to a friend about, I'll give you the example of who's better, LeBron James or Michael Jordan, right? Maybe you guys care about basketball, maybe you don't, I don't know. But everybody always gets heated up about this conversation. And then at the end of it, it doesn't go anywhere. It goes on for an hour, and then you say, you know what, we're just going to agree to disagree. And then friends hang out and they go for ice cream or they go for coffee or whatever it might be. And that's it. And the reason why they're able to do that is because they value one another. They don't care to be right. Yes, it's just a friendly debate. But at the end of the day, they say, you know what, it's not worth it to ruin a relationship. But when you do not have a good relationship with that person, you want to be right. Your ego kicks in. It's like my way or the highway. I have to get the last say. And this is where the disasters come in. So if we look at a master relationship, these are all the key characteristics. There's 2 main components: trust and commitment. What does trust mean? So trust is going to be like the foundation, the 2 pillars of the house, right? And then we're going to go quickly talk about these different foundations inside this house. So we call it a sound relationship house. So what does trust mean? Trust means that, okay, my spouse is going to be there for me. My spouse is going to have my back. When I tell my spouse something, they're not going to tell the whole world, right? They're going to keep it between us. And this builds a lot of trust, because now I could tell you my deepest, darkest secrets. I could tell you more about me. Because let's be honest, it's kind of embarrassing, or it's kind of sometimes we feel uncomfortable to talk about ourselves and what we feel, especially as men, right? Men feel very uncomfortable because we're always told that, you have to be a man. You can't feel emotions. You have to keep it within yourself. But this is not true at all if we think about it. Think about the Prophet ﷺ. When Angel Jibreel came to him and said, Iqra, who did he run to? He ran to Khadija radiallahu anha. And he said, Zammiluni, Zammiluni, wrap me up. And he was shivering, right? Think how beautiful this is for a minute. That he didn't go to anybody else, but he ran to his wife. And he was in the state of shock. He was like, he was shivering. And he was like, he just saw Angel Jibreel, but he was very vulnerable. And he was vulnerable to his wife. How beautiful is that? But here we are. We feel like we have to be all macho and we cannot show emotions and we cannot talk about how we feel. No, our spouses are supposed to be a source of comfort for us. And the wives are supposed to be a source of comfort for the husbands. The husbands are supposed to be a source of comfort for the wives. If our wives have something to tell us and they want to explain to us about what they're going through, we should not just say, oh, there you go again. No, we should be that source of comfort and allow them to express their feelings to us and vice versa, right? This is the beauty of his marriage, that we're a libas for one another. And what does a libas do? It covers up all your imperfection. It covers up every single thing that you're going through. Nobody could see if I have scars on my body. Nobody could see if I have any imperfections, but my clothing covers that. And we cover our imperfections for one another. This is the beauty of it. So this is what all encompassing of trust. And we'll talk about another aspect at the end, which is making sure that we remain faithful in our relationships. And we're going to talk about that later on. The other component is what we call commitment. And how does trust lead to commitment? Because now if I fully trust my spouse, what's going to happen? I'm going to feel more committed in this relationship. I'm going to feel like, okay, you know what? Nobody will have my back like this person. Nobody will be there like them. I want to make this work with them. So I'm going to have 2 feet in the door, not 1 foot in, 1 foot out, right? I'm not teeter-tottering thinking whether this relationship should work or not. I'm fully committed. And this is one issue that we're seeing today, is that people are not committed in their relationships. They're constantly thinking, you know what, maybe this is working, this is not going to work. They're not sure. And if you're not giving 100%, then what's going to happen is your spouse, they're going to recognize this. And when they recognize it, they're not going to be 100% committed. Now you got 2 people, and what happens that are not committed is bound to fail. So quickly, we're going to sum up what the first foundation is, what we talked about last time. And then we're going to get in more into the second foundation, which is managing conflict. All right, so my P is a little bit messed up over there. I should say friendship. All right, so the first foundation is the most important foundation, and we talked about this last time, so I'm just going to go quickly over it. It's called friendship. Friendship. Why is this so important? Because when you have a deep relationship and a friendship with a person, you're willing to overlook their faults. You're willing to overlook certain things that they do because you value them. You really like their company. So what happens is that if they do something towards you, you give them 70 excuses. You say, maybe they're sick, maybe they're not feeling well. Oh, you know what? Maybe they're just having a bad day. But when you don't care and you don't have a friendship with them, then what happens is that you start thinking, man, this person's a jerk. This person's like, I don't even want to be around them, right? They're really rude. So you don't give them the excuses. So there's 3 components of friendship. Number 1 is enhancing your love maps. What does this mean? Enhancing your love maps is like a compartment in your brain where you store all this information about your spouse, what they like, what they dislike, what makes them happy, what makes them sad, etc. See, there's beauty and there's like when you feel that, okay, my spouse knows so much about me. You feel like that love. And what happens is that who you were when you got married is not who you are today. I got married when I was 20 years old. I'm 34 now. I know I look very young, but alhamdulillah, say mashallah. But the thing is that, I'm not the same person. The thought process when I was 20 years old, I don't have the same thought process today. I don't think like I did back then. I've evolved. I've changed. Just like every single person in this room have changed because of our life experiences. But the problem is we do not relearn about our spouses. So we still think they have the same likes and dislikes when we first got married to them. And we need to constantly learn about one another. Okay, maybe you liked that food when we first got married. Maybe your taste buds have changed. Maybe you like to do certain activities now. Maybe you don't like to do certain things. Maybe there's certain interests and hobbies that you now have. What are those? Do we ever talk about that with our spouses, or do we just think, they're the same person? So that's number 1, enhancing your love maps. Number 2 is nurturing your fondness and admiration. And why this is so important is this is the antidote for contempt. Contempt is when you look down upon your spouse. Contempt is when you start to think that what value do they bring into this relationship? Now, we've all been there for a moment where we start to think, oh man, you know what? This person, they don't really bring that much value. Or we start to think that, okay, I'm not going to tell them because what benefit it's going to be. I'm just going to make the decision. But when we nurture that fondness and admiration and we say nice things about our spouses, then it reminds us, why did we even marry this person in the first place? It reminds us what they bring to this relationship, and we start to think, man, alhamdulillah, I picked the right spouse, right? Nobody else has these qualities. But then it also teaches and it lets my spouse know that I see these qualities within them. And when they notice that I see these qualities within them, they're more likely to continue doing them, right? And this is very important because, you know, often couples say, well, you used to do this when we first got married, but now you don't do it. And the person says, well, you never said anything. I didn't know you still liked it. And that's our fault because we never said anything to them about it. So that's the second part. And the last thing is turning towards each other, not away from each other. And what does this mean is that, let's say me and my wife are driving in the car and she says, hey, look at that bird. Now, I don't care about a bird. She doesn't care about a bird. What is this? What we're trying to do? This is what we call bids for emotional connection, right? She's trying to connect with me using that bird as an excuse. Now I have two options. Number one, I could just ignore her and I could keep driving. And over time, she might try again. But you know what's going to happen is she's going to feel hurt that I keep ignoring her. So she's going to stop. And this is what happens with a lot of couples. They stop the communication between each other because now they feel so hurt that my spouse, they never talk to me. They never respond. So they just feel like, you know what, it's better not to say anything because I feel more hurt when I try than when I don't try. So then what happens is, you know, or the other option that I say is that you could respond and then a conversation will ensue. So these are the three foundations for building a friendship. And these are things that we do activities within our sessions to help build that up, right? And build the communication and build the fondness and admiration and so forth. Now, I'm gonna skip over this because I want to get to the second foundation, which is managing conflict, right? So this is all brand new information. How do we manage conflict? See, the problem is most people, they come to the imams or they come to people and they say, well, I want to manage conflict, right? This is the wrong approach. First, in order to manage conflict, you have to work on your friendship. Why would you care to resolve conflict with me if we don't even have a relationship? If we saw each other and we're upset and you don't even know me, you wouldn't care to fix the relationship. And that's what happens with husbands and wife, is that they say, well, we want to manage the conflict, but they're always at odds with each other. First, you have to fix the friendship between them. Then the managing the conflict becomes very easy. Why? Because you built all these positive sentiments. And now you have all these positive sentiments that will override the negativity. But if all you have is negativity and no positive sentiments, that even when you try managing the conflict, you're always going to think about what your spouse did to you. You're going to think that, are they actually trying to change or are they just saying that, right? And then we keep thinking and we have this, negative doubts in our mind. So how do we manage this conflict? The first thing is letting your spouse influence you. What does this mean? What does it mean that letting your spouse influence you? So there's three things. The first thing is do not up the ante. What do we mean by upping the ante? See, what happens is when usually somebody perceives negativity, they usually meet it with resistance. This is what we mean by upping the ante, right? For instance, your spouse says, you are ignoring me. Now, there's four options that usually happen, that occur. Instead of responding and seeing what they need, what they do is that number one, they might ignore them, right? They might just completely ignore them when their spouse says, you are ignoring me, so they just ignore them. And this is what we call stonewalling, that they're physically there, but mentally they've checked out. And so the spouse is like, hello, I'm talking to you, you're ignoring me, and they just keep watching whatever they're watching or on their phones, and they're just completely ignoring them. That's one thing that they might do. Second thing that they might do is they might become defensive. Yes, I am ignoring you. So what? What are you going to do about it? Right? That's another thing they might do. The third thing that they might do is they might criticize them. Yes, because nothing you ever say makes sense. You don't make sense at all. So they're criticizing the person. So these are what we mean by upping the ante. You're making the situation worse. Instead, what you should be doing is acknowledging your spouse's feelings. What we're trying to do instead is drowning out how they feel. And what that makes, and that what that does is infuriates your spouse even more and makes them think that their point of view is not valid. So, I mean, instead of trying to understand them, we're just completely ignoring them. So the first thing is letting your, how do you let your spouse influence you? Is you do not up the ante. The second thing is learning to yield. What do we mean by you learning to yield? This is what we mean. What we mean is learning to compromise. See, you don't always need to become argumentative and trying to get your point across. Often what happens is that spouses, they want to win. They want to win the argument. But in trying to win the argument, actually, you both lose. You lose, and also your spouse loses as well. Because what happens when you do not yield to the other person? And the reality is somebody always has to yield. Somebody has to just stop for the sake of it. Because what happens is now I'm upset and you're upset. So how can we even have a good time? So an example is your spouse says, let's go out tonight. And then you say, no, I'm really busy. And then you say, their spouse says, well, come on, we said we're going to go out tonight. And then he said, no, you go out yourself. And then now an argument ensues. Who won in this? Now your spouse cannot have a good time because they're upset that, okay, you just argued with me. I can't have a good time at home because my spouse is upset. Who's winning in all of this? Nobody is winning. So this is what we mean by learning to yield. And the last thing is understanding where your spouse is coming from. So we talked about acknowledging your spouse's feelings. And it's understanding, why they feel that way. See, often what happens is that why we get into arguments is because we don't understand why our spouse feels a certain way about a particular thing. Let me give you an example, right? You might have this unwavering loyalty to a family member, right? Unwavering loyalty to a family member. And the reason you might have that is because of something that they did for you when you were younger. So you've always had that good memories of them. And no matter what they say, you jump up and you start, like they call you, you just leave the house and you say, I got to take care of this person. I have to do this. But your spouse gets married to you and they're like, why are you always just dropping everything and going and running after them? Why are you like, I'm your spouse. You should be staying with me. Why are you giving them so much attention and doing everything for them? But then you just say, you don't understand. I'm just going to go. I have to go. I have to go. And you did not explain to your spouse why you feel that way. So they don't know. And now they're getting upset. But if you were to explain and say, hey, why I felt this way is because what they did for me when I was younger. And now your spouse will understand where you're coming from. And they might say, well, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead, do what you need. But the problem occurs when we do not explain ourselves. And then we get in trouble as well. So one thing I tell spouses to do is take turns summarizing. Because what happens is we become so defensive when we're talking that we don't even listen to what the other person is saying, right? We're just trying to get our point across. So what I tell them is to face each other and talk about the issue. And before you respond, summarize what your spouse is saying and ask your spouse, did I understand this correctly? And if your spouse says no, try again. Because the problem is we're just speaking without listening. And that always gets a person in trouble. All right. So now, what else can you do? How do we manage conflict? It's solve your solvable problems. What does this mean? Solve your solvable problems. The reality is only 1/3 of problems are solvable. That's just according to research, right? 2/3 of problems are not solvable. And we have to understand that you cannot solve everything. But then you might say, well, how do we solve it? Well, we have to use hikmah. We have to use wisdom and knowing that, okay, what am I going to actually, fight? Like, I'm going to make sure that we solve. And what are the things that I'm just going to be like, okay, you know what? This is not worth it. Because not everything is worth it in a relationship to talk about and trying to fix. If you always get angry and you always try to fix something, then what's going to happen is it's not going to mean anything. Like you're a parent, right? And you always get angry at your child. What's going to happen? your child is going to say, oh, there goes dad, there goes mom, they're always angry, and they're just going to roll their eyes. But if you were good and you treated your child nicely and you talk to them in a soft manner, right? And then the moment that you get upset, they're going to be scared. They're going to be like, oh my God, mom and dad never get mad at me, right? Now something is happening where they actually show their anger. And that's the thing, is that we cannot just get upset over everything and try solving it. There's something that we just have to let go. So then how do we do this? How do we solve the 1/3 of the issues? Number one, it's how we speak to one another. The first thing is what we call soften your startups. What we say is do not start off with a harsh startup. What is a harsh startup? It's how we speak to one another. So according to research, 95% of the time, the way I start off the conversation is going to dictate the outcome of the conversation. If I start off in a rude and aggressive tone, why are you like that? Why are you all so lazy? What is wrong with you? My spouse, even if I apologize to them, my spouse is not going to care about my apology. They're going to be so fixated on why did I even speak to them in that manner in the first place? So I have two options. I could say, I did not appreciate what you did. Can you please do X, Y, Z? Or I could get upset and say, what's wrong with you? Why are you always so lazy? The latter is not going to do anything. The former, when I talk nicely to them, they're more likely to accept their mistake and try fixing it. So that's the first thing, is soften your startups. The next thing is if you notice that things are going sideways, you notice that your spouse is, they're not taking it well, they make a odd face or something like that. This is what we call repair attempts. You need to maybe grab their hand, hold them, say, let me start over. Let's start this again. Because now at that point, trying to continue, it's not going to go anywhere, right? All you're doing is making things worse. So this is what we call repair attempts. I've noticed that, okay, you didn't like what I said. Let's start over. Let's do this again, right? Taking their hand, being gentle with them. And the last thing is soothing yourself and your spouse. If you notice that they're angry, if you notice that they're upset, what do? Is we should soothe them. Because if they're not feeling, if they're angry or they're upset, how is this going to go anywhere? So we're a partner, we're a team. Let me soothe you. In soothing you, I'm also soothing myself. And now we can actually discuss the situation. And the last thing is, how do we solve our problems? Solve our solvable issues is compromise. And this is something that we need to learn today, because it's usually my way or the highway. You either do what I say, and we give ultimatums, right? If you don't do this, then I'm going to do this. That's very childish to give ultimatums to your spouse. This is not how marriages work. So we do not give ultimatums. We learn to compromise. It's not my way or the highway. It's two adults that have to see eye to eye and try working on it together, right? Or else what's going to happen is the spouses are going to become more distant. So the last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to, managing conflict is, how do we overcome gridlock? What does gridlock mean? Gridlock means that you and your spouse are two opposite sides and can't keep opposing one another, right? You just keep butting heads, just constantly butting heads, and neither of you could make any headway and to understand the other person's perspective. So you are so adamant about your position. You're just like, no, this is my position. So this is what we call gridlock. So the first thing is, to give you an example, is that you've had the same argument over and over with no resolution, right? Another example is neither of you can address the issue with empathy or affection. And the last thing is, the issue is increasingly polarizing and compromise seems impossible. So what do we do here? How do we solve this? What we've noticed, and according to research again, usually why people are at gridlock and they're at this point is because they're not listening to the partner's dreams. They're not listening to what the person wants to attain. It's usually what I want. And, the other person feels so neglected. I had a couple just recently where the woman, she was a mother, she was raising her kids and everything. And now her kids are older, right? And she always had the dream of, becoming, I forget what field she wanted to work in, and getting her degree and actually feel like she's doing something because now her children are grown up. But the husband, he was so adamant of the fact that no, even though the kids are gone, I want you to just remain at home and not just take care of the house. And I understand, okay, fine, you want your wife to be at home, you want them to like focus on the family and everything. But at the same time, you're not listening to the other person's dreams, right? They want to accomplish something for themselves, and they want to do something. So, I mean, it goes both ways. It's not just the wife, it's sometimes the husband. He wants to accomplish something, and the wife, they're not listening to the partner's dreams. And they say that, why are you quitting your job? Why are you doing this? We're going to go broke. You're the leader. Like, you have to earn and all of these things. And the person's just like, man, I have a hobby. I want to accomplish something. So the first thing is we have to be respectful, right? We have to be respectful. The second thing is we have to be non-judgmental. If I can't tell you about my dreams, if I can't tell you, then who am I going to tell? Who am I going to tell about what I'm feeling and what I want to accomplish in life? Because then that's not a real partner at that time. So take a break when you feel like you're you're overloaded with all these emotions. Instead of trying to, beat the hammer down and trying to tell your spouse, take a break. And this is what I tell couples is to call a timeout. Call a timeout and separate for a little bit. Tell each other how much time you need, and so that you could come back with a fresh perspective. Because if you both are overloaded with all these emotions, now all we're doing is we're just not getting anywhere. So we need to sometimes take a break in order to overcome this gridlock. Now, quickly, I just want to talk about something, and this is what we call the 5 love languages, right? And why this is so important. So the 5 love languages are different ways of expressing and receiving love. So I talked about earlier, sexual intimacy, right? And how that's so important in a relationship. And I really want to talk about these love languages because what I've noticed is that there's a lot of needs not being met in relationships between husband and wives. Let's be honest here, we're all adults. We got married, yes, for multiple reasons, but one of the things that we've always been told is relationships are haram, right? Before marriage. Now, when you get married, there's certain needs that you want, and sometimes it's emotional needs, sometimes physical needs, whatever they are, right? But only your spouse could give you those, what you're looking for. And when we're not getting our needs met, what happens is now we feel like, okay, my spouse is not giving it to me, so I'm going to go look elsewhere. A'udhu billah. And this is what's happening today. So I want to talk about these love languages quickly because this is something that each one of us can, work on with our own spouses and learn, okay, what is my spouse's love language? When I first got married, my wife would always see her mom cooking for her father. So she thought that, okay, the way to my heart was cooking. Now, I appreciated a good meal, don't get me wrong. But the reality is my love languages is cleanliness. I love a clean house, right? If I had to pick between a good meal or a clean house, I'll pick a clean house. I know you guys might call me crazy, but that's just how I am, right? So why is that so important? Because when I see a clean house, I just feel so happy, right? I just feel like, oh, my life is all together. But when I see a dirty house, I'm just like, oh my God, I feel, a little bit like, oh man, nothing is working out that day. So this is what I mean by love languages, understanding what's important to your spouse. So there's 5 different love languages, and this is not all encompassing, but this is just so that we could get an understanding. So the first thing is words of affirmation. What does this words of affirmation mean? This is spoken affection, praise, encouragement, compliments. When's the last time you use the affection and praise and encouragement towards your spouse, right? I mean, like when I get a nice haircut, when I get a haircut, I like it when my wife says that's a nice haircut, right? When we like it when people praise us, especially our spouse, because we're trying to look good for them. So words of affirmation, they're important. So why I'm telling you these things, because I want every single person to go home tonight and talk to their spouses about what their top 2 love languages are and learn about one another. So now we could implement this. So number 1 is words of affirmation. Number 2 is acts of service, right? What is acts of service? Anything that your partner does to ease your workload. So that could be something as simple as like cooking, cleaning, like, okay, I'm very tired. I don't really like to do laundry. So your spouse does the laundry for you, right? These are all different acts of service, even massaging your spouse, right? Massaging the feet, massaging the legs, whatever it might be. What's wrong with that? There's nothing wrong with it. You're a husband and wife. So these are different acts of service that you could do. The other thing is receiving gifts. Maybe we like gifts. It's a sunnah to, the best kind of sadaqah is that what you give to your family. So giving gifts to somebody. So it's a thoughtful gift to show you that you are special, that I was thinking of you. Maybe that is your spouse's love language. The other thing is quality time. What do we mean by quality time? Every single person has a different definition of what quality time is. You know, for me, quality time is if me and my spouse are in the same room and we're doing something. But my wife, she doesn't think that's quality time. We could be sitting together for 2 hours and she said, oh, we didn't do anything. You didn't give me any quality time. Because to her, quality time is me facing her and actually speaking to each other. And now she feels like, okay, you gave me time. But if we're together for 2 hours, I didn't do anything, right? So it's undivided. So this is why we have to understand how do each person see what quality times means to one another. And the last thing is physical touch. Sometimes for people, it's physical touch. They need to feel their spouse. They need to hold hands, hugs, etc. So these are all different love languages. You have to understand what you need, and your spouse has to understand how to give that to you. And we need to talk about these things. When is the last time that we actually spoke to our spouses about what is our love language and what can you do? Because this is a cheat code, right? If I'm giving you exactly what you need, why would you be sad? Why would you be ungrateful? Why would you not be happy? If I'm getting my love language, then that's going to make me happy and want to do more for my spouse. So in the end, you are benefiting more as well. You're benefiting just as much as your spouse is by doing these things, because now they're happier. Now I don't have to deal with anything. Now my spouse wants to do more for me, right? So this is why love languages are so important. The last thing, I want to talk about, and before I pass it on, is this infidelity and lack of intimacy that's happening within relationships. And I know this is going to feel uncomfortable talking about this, but it's very necessary that we talk about it, because this is leading to a lot of divorces today. I can't tell you how, like, almost 50%, maybe 40% of the marital cases that I see all revolve around lack of intimacy and infidelity, right? And what we're seeing is that people are either, watching pornography, they're finding different ways to get their desires met. They're seeking out other people in their workplace or wherever they might be, because they're not feeling fulfilled in their relationships. And this is why it's so important to work on our relationship. It's not just, physical, it's also emotional, right? The emotional component. And then that might lead to the physical, or sometimes the physical leads to the emotional, whatever it might be. But we need to work on this, because what's happening is if people, they're going outside of their marriages seeking that, because they're not getting it from within the home. So yes, most of the time it's women that need the emotional aspect. Most of the time it's men that need the physical aspect. That's not to say that it can't be reversed, but I'm just saying based upon research. So why do we need to work on this? Is because now if I feel fulfilled in my relationship, if I feel that I'm getting the needs met, guess what? I will overlook what my spouse is not doing for me, right? Because yes, your spouse can't do everything, but if I'm getting my needs met, then I'm going to overlook certain things, because you know what? It's okay. I'm getting what I need out of this relationship. So I'm willing to be more forgiving. So before I end, I'm just going to reiterate, please, 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 please work on your relationships. It's never too late. I had 80 or not, maybe 75-year-olds come in and work on the relationships. They want to be happy. They want to be successful. They want to live out the rest of their lives in a peaceful manner. It's never too late. Do not think that, you can't work on it. We learn, our Deen teaches us, emphasizes to go to the people of knowledge, go get the help that you need. We have resources like Ihsan coaching and other places. Please work on your relationships, and do not think that divorce is the answer. Yes, not all marriages will work. We understand that. But before you run off and try thinking that divorce is the answer, work on your relationship. I guarantee you, inshallah, with the help of Allah, that you will see more benefit in this than anything else, inshallah.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Jazakumullahu khairan, Brother Farhan, mashallah, for covering almost everything that we thought we needed to cover. As I was coming here, subhanAllah, I was trying to get some of the younger folks to come through and listen to this very important topic. And they told me, well, this is for married folks. So it made me so happy to see some young brothers and sisters, mashallah, who are not yet married, that they made the efforts and they came through. So jazakumullahu khairan. I want to actually begin with all of you guys first, the young folks, that understand that this is perhaps one of the most important decisions that you will make in your life, who you choose as a partner. So choose wisely and understand that in Islam, marriage is an act of ibadah. With the right intention, you are obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you are worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for parents that are here, if they have their children who are suitable for marriage in the coming months or years, understand very well that don't pressure them into a marriage that you know that deep down that it may not work out, or you understand, or you know your own children better than anyone else, and without equipping them and without actually preparing them for that relationship. So with that, mashallah, Mufti Asif and myself, we do offer premarital counseling as well. I always say that because believe me, when we say that, there's so many things that we end up discussing. It's actually, we have a list, a whole questionnaire, and subhanAllah, there's a lot of things that can be avoided if you do, premarital counseling. Now, for the married folks, as Brother Farhan ended with, subhanAllah, that divorce is not an answer. Divorce is not the answer to your problems, but actually sitting down and understanding where the problem was and addressing it and come to an agreement of fixing that issue. And subhanAllah, as when I was studying in Pakistan and in my ifta, in my specialization year, I came to know of a case, one particular that I can never forget. SubhanAllah, there was an individual who came out and he came with an istiftah. He was seeking a fatwa. And he had no idea of divorce rulings. And at the end of all, the whole story, he came to know that he was divorced in the second year of his marriage. And this man was a grandfather at that time. So you know what that means. And he sat there in tears and he had no answers. So it's very important for you sometimes as husbands or sometimes as wives, we may feel that we know everything there is to know about marriage, and I know how to prevent or press the right buttons and prevent the divorce from occurring. SubhanAllah, you would be surprised. Many brothers, they don't know the types of divorce. Many brothers, they don't even understand how a divorce occurs. And SubhanAllah, we deal with it on almost weekly basis. Every week we have 1 to 3 cases lined up. In fact, even we have one lined up tomorrow. So why is that? As Brother Farhan mentioned, subhanAllah, these divorces, it can be prevented when you address the problem early on, when you're willing to sit down, when you're willing to come to a compromise and you're coming to an agreement in fixing your marriage. And subhanAllah, at times it becomes what we've seen in the very recent past is that it's always ego at the end of the day. Somehow the wife feels that she's got that chance at times. I'm not just gonna put wives on the spot, but I'm just giving an example that they have a chance now to get back at the husband, where the husband might feel that finally I'm over this marriage. Where subhanAllah, they don't understand and they fail to realize it's the children who are going to be paying the price for their mistakes and for their negligence. So I urge everybody to make firm commitment to yourself, inshallah, that you're going to be willing to compromise on things to better your marriage, number one. Number two, understand where are your problems. And I highly, highly urge and recommend you guys to reach out to the resources in your local community. MashaAllah, Mufti Asif and myself, we work here along with Sheikh Hamza as well. And or you can reach out to Ihsan Coaching, MashaAllah. They have the whole team to work on that. And just a pro tip that I always tell people, subhanAllah, when it comes to arguing, there's so many things that needs to be covered, but I don't want to take up too much of the time. understand that if you're the husband or the wife, you don't want to have the last say in that argument. Sometimes most of the time, what we see is something, an argument that could easily be avoided and it could easily have been patched. But because of the ego that comes into it, what happens is the man feels he needs to have the final word. Well, understand this moving forward, that anybody who constantly replies back and always is quarreling with others, that person is disliked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So understand that very well. And Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that if you give up arguments, even if you are correct, I guarantee a palace for such an individual in Jannah. So understand that who you are arguing with is your life partner. It's the mother of your children, if you have children, subhanAllah. And one thing that I always tell people, that if you end up having issues, I know sometimes we flare up and we're like, okay, well, I can't get over this. How dare she, or how dare he did that. One of the best way that helps calms us down is write down all of the good things that they have done for you. Not what you have done for them, but what they have done for you. And then when you see that, you will come to a list of so many, subhanAllah, things when you sit there, and we actually did that in the office. And alhamdulillah, they came in with 100% certainty that they were going to walk out the office, with divorce. But alhamdulillah, after 3 hours, they patched up. And mashallah, we get feedback from them at times, and we have a lot of time brothers coming in and they tell us too that I don't even recognize my partner anymore, as if it's a whole new person. Why? SubhanAllah, because they understood deep down that what marriage is, it's not just about two people. It's a journey. Like what Sheikh Farhan said earlier, that you're not going to find 100% what you're looking for in your marriage. You need to understand that you have your own shortcomings, so does your life partner, so does your spouse. And notice, subhanAllah, the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is so amazing that even in the Quran, as in the khutbah that it was mentioned, that the mithal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, that hunna libasul lakum wa antum libasul lahun, that they are a garment which conceals your faults and it hides away. What is one of the hikmah behind it? The scholars, they explain, subhanAllah, that when the garment, it gets stained or it gets, old, you don't just think about just throwing it out. You work on it, you clean it, and you work on improving it, and you make sure that it is still sustainable as you go along. And we as Muslims, we follow the example of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the famous hadith that, I am the best to my family. So when we follow the example of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we need to understand that why is it that when we are outside, we live one personality, but when we go inside our house, as if we don't even know who we are. And we respond with everything. Just today after Jummah, I was sitting with somebody and he told me that, brother, I messed up. Yes, last night I went home and I yelled at everybody. I yelled at my wife, I yelled at my teenage boys, and my young ones, they cried, except for my youngest daughter. So I told him, why her? And then he said, well, because she doesn't really respond back. She's only 2. And I was like, okay. And then he's like, immediately after that, I went and prayed Isha, and everybody's mad at me now. Now nobody's answering my calls. So I had to sit down and talk to him. So we need to understand that it is not about your ego. It's okay to lose to your spouse. It is okay to, to make mistakes and admit your mistake. Who are you losing to? It's your life partner, subhanAllah. Your victories are with them, and your losses and your defeats are with them. So it's not about your point. Remember, your points, you will get many, many opportunities in life, but your partner is far greater than your point. Understand that and work on your marriages. And this is an amana. The children are amana of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes you and I, we don't realize, the chaos that we cause in the lives of our loved ones because of our own problems. We always blame that it's her fault. Oh, it's my son's fault. Oh, it's never our fault. We need to understand that 90% of the time it's actually our fault. So, I also want to give it to Sheikh Mufti Asif, inshallah, and we have a lot of questions coming in, but Jazakumullah.
Bismillah, wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah, amma ba'd. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Jazakallah khairan to my colleagues over here for their wonderful explanations. So one thing that Brother Farhan wanted me to speak about, first and foremost, when it comes to counseling and coaching, we always say that the first goal is always to reconcile. It's always to get back together. It's always whenever there are issues that do occur, and issues will occur at times, it's always to take every step possible, take every avenue possible to try to patch up, to try to get back together. Divorce should always be a last resort thing, the very, very last resort thing, if it's necessary. This is why it's considered to be a permissible action in Islam. However, it is considered to be the worst of the permissible actions of Islam. This is something that, at times it has to happen, but it's something which, when it does occur, then it's mentioned how the throne of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shakes. The shaitan becomes happy when two people become split like this. He feels like his mission has been fulfilled in some way. This is what the shaitan likes to see when he sees families that are being split up. This is why, as Mufti Umar said, premarital counseling is vital and necessary. Many people who are in marriages do not understand the masail, the rulings when it comes to the aspect of talaq. Islam is a religion and a deen that we are taught to do everything with ihsan. We are taught to do everything in the most excellent way possible. Even when it comes to the time when a divorce must occur, you even do that with ihsan. You do that in an amicable way. You do it in a way where if you have to do it, you do it in the way which is taught to us in Sharia, and then you try to split with sakina and with peace. No hard feelings. You go about your way. That's it. That's how it should be. So people don't understand what are the masail and what are the rulings when it comes to talaq, when it comes to divorce. Yes, when it comes to a divorce aspect, there are different options that are there. Now, from a Shari'i standpoint, yes, first and foremost, it is the husband's haqq and the right to pronounce the divorce. But there are other options that are out there as well, because we have dealt with cases where there are sisters that are abused, whether it's physically, emotionally, whatever it may be, and there are other options that are out there for them. But, the main thing is when it comes to talaq, there's different types of divorce. There's the talaq raj'i, the clear talaq, wherein the husband would just say something like, you are divorced in English, or anti tariq, or talaqtuki, words like that, right? You just say it one time, and then what happens in that particular case, if it's necessary to get to that point, now what happens is the woman, the wife, she gets into her iddah period. She's in her iddah for the amount of 3 menstrual cycles. And in that period of time, this is why Sharia is beautiful, because there's a period of time, if the divorce is given once or twice, there's like a cool-off period. There's times where it may be said, and then all of a sudden, you cool off, emotions kick in, and you feel like, what have I done? Why did I do this? And you regret what you did. So what do? The husband goes back, and he takes her back as the wife again. Now, of course, when that happens, if he says talaq one time, that means there's only 2 more left, meaning that if he says it 2 more times, then the marriage would be completely over. But what many people do not realize is that saying it 3 times, and a lot of people, unfortunately, they say it 3 times in one go, that it ends the marriage completely. It ends the marriage completely. In the sense that now it is considered a talaq mughallatha, which is an irrevocable divorce. Which means the only way now the husband and the wife can get back together is after the iddah is over, she by chance gets married to another man, and by chance they get divorced, and then she goes through another iddah, and now she is allowed to get married back to the first husband again. That's what the rule is, as mentioned in the Quran. So people do not realize, and they say these things, they say, I was angry when I said it. And this is one of the questions that we actually had, talaq in anger. Now, I always say to people that nobody's going to say talaq in happiness. Nobody's going to say, oh, honey, sweetie, habibti, you are divorced. Joking aside, you're going to be angry when you say something like that. You're never going to be happy, right? This is a natural thing. No one's naturally happy when they say something like that. There are certain rules and regulations in Sharia, but it's very difficult to get to that level, about your aql, losing your mind completely, where you can't, even tell the difference between the earth and the sky and so on and so forth. But that's a very, very rare thing. Most of the time, 99.99% of the time, people are aware and they have the aql and they have the intellect in terms of what they are saying. So if you are angry, yes, the talaq still counts. And it's still a valid talaq. It's still a valid divorce. This is something which is important, and many people do not realize this. I always tell people in premarital counseling, do not go to the T word. Do not say it at all, the word talaq, or the D word, divorce. Do not say this word. Do not even consider this word, because once it's, in your mind and it's on the tip of your tongue and it comes out, then you don't know if you're going to say it multiple times. The shaitan is going to get happy. He's going to get to you. He's going to whisper to you. So this is something crucial and vital. Stay away from that word as much as you can. Another type of divorce is the talaq ba'in, where it's unclear words, meaning it's words, for example, and that has to do with intention. So for example, if the husband says to the wife, like, get out of the house, or, get out of here. And with his intent, with his niyyah, he meant divorce, then it will be a divorce. But that is something that depends on the intention of what he said. And if he really did mean divorce and he's not saying it, that's between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, baynahu wa bayna Allah. And he'll be held accountable if he's lying and if he says, no, I did not mean it in divorce. So if a talaq al-ba'in occurs, now what happens in there is that the woman is in her iddah, and the only way they can get back together now is if the nikah is renewed. But if it's said 3 times again, then khalas. But the talaq al-ba'in usually is, it's unclear words. So in that case, the only way that they can get back together is if the nikah occurs again. Now, if there is a case where a woman is being abused or whatever it may be, and there's really no way out, and she's been experiencing this, then she has the right also to ask for khula. She has a right to ask, for a divorce and seek a divorce from the side of the husband. Now, what has to happen here is a couple of things. Number one, it has to be in return for something. So, for example, many times what's mentioned is that she will return her mahar or her dowry in return for the divorce from the husband. And if the husband, in that case, if there is valid ground in which he is violating the rights of the wife, there's a list out there actually that's mentioned in the books of fiqh, and when we do ifta, we learn about these particular rules and regulations. If her rights are not being fulfilled, or if they're being taken away in certain senses, and if he's refusing to grant the divorce to her, then there's a 4th option that's out there, which is the faskhun nikah, the annulment of nikah. And how that's done is that you have to go to a board of scholars who will listen to the case back and forth from each side, and they will be able to decide whether they forcefully break off this marriage, and the divorce will then occur. This is valid in Sharia as well. So there are multiple options that are out there, but again, we always say to seek counseling first and foremost, and do something that in a way that you will not regret the decision that you made. Do something in a way where, I said, subhanAllah, I tried everything. I took every avenue that I could. We did everything that we were able to, but it still didn't work out. Alhamdulillah, then you move on. There's nothing wrong with that then. At least you feel comfortable that you did something about it. But when you don't do anything about it and it just leads to it, and what happens a lot is that a lot of times people come to us when it's too late and when it's too difficult to solve the case. When the word divorce is already being pronounced, or when it's really close to being pronounced, that's when people come. When they already know, they see the problems happening months before, weeks before, whatever it may be, years before even, and they don't, seek counseling then, when it's easily fixable in those times. So if there are any issues that you are unable to work out, try to seek help and assistance sooner rather than later. That's when it will become easier to patch things up. And in our experience, it's been much easier to patch things up, I'm sure with Brother Farhan as well, when you come earlier. Otherwise, it becomes extremely difficult. So that's one thing. The second thing I wanted to say also, just to reiterate a few things that I said. If you remember, many of you who were here when the summer began, I gave a khutbah kind of to kick off this topic, talking about home is where the heart is. And I wanted to kick off the summer with this particular topic in my Jummah khutbah, because of the fact that summer is the time where people are spending more time with each other. Children are at home usually on vacation. Husbands and wives, you're probably together more. You're going to be with the family more. You're going to go on vacation, whatever else it may be. Summer is usually a time where you are together more. And we talk about the aspect of the saying home is where the heart is, and not house is where the heart is, because house is just the structure, the physical structure that is on the outside, but the home is what makes it up inside. It's the family. It is the people you are most comfortable with. And again, the word in Arabic, maskin or maskan, this comes from the word sukun, which means peace and tranquility. Your home is where you want to feel sakina. It's where you want to feel tranquility. It's with your spouse and with your loved one that you want to feel this feeling and experience this feeling as much as you can. But the thing is, you need those foundational aspects to have barakah in the home. Mashallah, Brother Farhan talked about a lot of the aspects when it comes to counseling and psychology and all the other matters that are over there. But the deen is integral and important. If we do not have the deen within our homes, if we don't have Islam within our homes, if we're not striving to follow the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ within our homes, then what's going to happen is that we're going to lack barakah. And if there's no barakah in our house, then the shaitan will get to our households much easier. I had mentioned, a couple of things. I had mentioned that when we enter the home, you enter the house with cheerfulness and with a smile. No matter how difficult your day was outside the house, do not bring that baggage back home. Be cheerful and be happy and greet your family with a smile. That's necessary. And when you enter the house, the second thing is make the dua. The dua in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Allahumma inni as'aluka khayr al-mawliji wa khayr al-makhraj, bismillahi walajna wa bismillahi kharajna wa ala Allahi rabbina tawakkalna. Right, this is the dua where the Prophet ﷺ said, say when you enter the house, oh Allah, I ask you for good both when entering and when going out. In the name of Allah, we have entered, and in the name of Allah, we have gone out. And in Allah, our Lord, do we trust. And then in the end, the Prophet ﷺ, of this hadith, he mentioned, then that make salam to your family. When you make salam to your family when you enter, this causes the shaitan to go away. Right? He says to his little followers that la mabita lakum, when you say this dua and you enter the house with salam, he says there's no place for you to stay today. Leave your house and go. However, if you don't enter in this manner, then he says you have a place now to spend the night, you have a place to stay. And obviously if the shaitan makes himself at home in your house, then it's going to be easier for him to whisper in your ear. It's going to be easier for him to get the family to get into conflicts. And this is something that we should try to avoid. So, something as simple and as basic as this, the deen gives us a solution to bring barakah into our houses, and we lack that. And the other thing I had mentioned is meals. We eat. Alhamdulillah, we have so much food in our houses, we eat multiple times a day. But how many times do we eat together as a family? How many times do we sit at the dinner table together? Are we sharing, husbands and wives, even sharing a utensil or out of the plate, as the Prophet ﷺ used to do with Aisha radiallahu anha? This brings barakah and this brings a great amount of blessing, right? Sharing and complimenting each other as well. And the third thing, family time. Having that important time. Farhan talked about it as well. Having that crucial family time together. When it comes to being in the house, even doing ta'aleem together, teaching the deen, being an example for your children, praying salah, bringing your children to pray salah as well. Having the moments, not only with your family and with your children, but husbands and wives as well. Making time for one another nowadays is something that people are lacking. Everyone's at work, everyone's busy doing their own thing, and all of a sudden you come home and you're tired, you go on your device, this and that, you eat and you crash, you go to sleep. How much time do people actually spend conversing with one another, asking how your day was, asking, what's going on in your life? How many times are people spending time with their children? How much time are people spending with their children saying that, how's your day? What's going on? Who are your friends? People don't even know who their friends are. So when the children aren't receiving love, they go elsewhere to try to receive advice. When the spouse isn't receiving love, she or he goes elsewhere to receive advice. And then that, gets into that creates emotional bonds with other people, with other strangers. And na'udhu billah, that may bring the aspect of infidelity into the marriage. So there's so many things that we can do that are just simple things to implement within our households, inshallah, and to try our best to bring barakah into the household. So that being said, inshallah, I think we'll get to some of these questions over here. We have a few minutes, so about 10 minutes before salah. So yeah, so the one about anger, we covered that one.
So we have a question that post divorce counseling. How would that work if the wife would not agree, especially the divorce occurred because it was the husband's fault? See, post divorce counseling, yes, we can offer it. It just all depends, and it all varies.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
So yes, we can offer that, and inshallah you can reach out to us, with Mufti Asif's email, and inshallah we would schedule that. Does the woman have the right to say yes or no to the husband? For example, if the husband wants to go out, she can tell him not to. It depends where he's going, and it depends if he's taking you or not. So yes, you do have the option to say yes or no. It's not that you are his property. So, but if for example, there are, certain times where he needs to go somewhere and the wife is just all of a sudden like, well, no, you can't go at all. Well, that's not how life works. So obviously, as long as you're reasonable with your statements, then yes, you do have the right.
So just to add one point to that one as well, it's also important for the husband to realize the emotions of his wife. If he wants to go out somewhere and she wants to say that, hey, don't go, it could be perhaps because she doesn't want to be left back. She doesn't want to be lonely. She may not have another companion, or anything like that. So the husband needs to also see the emotion of his wife and what she's experiencing and, judge the situation in that particular way as well.
So there's two things I want to mention. One is on this question and one on the previous question about post-divorce coaching. So on this one, what I always tell couples is that, a lot of times the spouse, they don't want their husband or wife to leave, especially the husband, is because they don't usually give enough time to them, right? So what I always advise people is that if you know you need to go somewhere, so spend that time before or after with them. So if I'm going out somewhere, like I'm here today, Friday, I'm in St. Louis. So where am I going to be tomorrow on Saturday? I'm going to be with my family, right? You have to remember to be balanced in your life, right? If you keep going out constantly, and this is something that I see within, especially males, I'll be honest with you, is that they constantly want to go out. They constantly want to be around other people, forgetting that they have a family at home. So there has to be this balance that, okay, if I'm hanging out with my friends or going somewhere, let me spend that time with them, my spouse beforehand. So then guess what? They will not be upset. They will gladly say, go out and do whatever you need because they will themselves feel fulfilled in the relationship. So that's one point. Also, post-divorce coaching. One thing I want to say is that this is very crucial. This is something that, Mufti Saab and them offer. We also offer it. But why am I talking about this? Is because you should not get remarried until you do it. You should not get remarried until you get post-divorce coaching. Why? Because there's emotions and there's, maybe things that you have been through that now, if you do not work through them and process your emotions, the next time you get married, you're going to bring in that baggage into the relationship. And we often see this, that now they constantly compare who they're married to the person that they were previously married. And they get triggered and they say, well, you remind me of my ex. Why? Because they did not go through that emotions and they did not process it. And this is something also for males that I've seen. And I deal with a lot of males when it comes to post-divorce. And they need to also talk about it. And they came and they have a safe space to talk about what they went through and the difficulties of it as well, and healing, and now what to look for in their next marriage. Because maybe we did not do that in the first time around, but definitely the second time around, we should know exactly what we want and what we need out of whoever we get married to.
So, yeah, the next question we have is it accurate that a woman cannot unilaterally divorce the husband without his approval? Are there any exceptions to this? Yes, it is true that a woman cannot just get up and divorce her husband. This is an agreement between the two, and the haqq Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the husband to divorce. Now, if the woman feels that she's neglected and she wants out of that marriage, as Mufti Saab mentioned, that yes, she has other avenues that she can explore and go and take her case up to the Qadi and they will hear, and she has the option of khula or potentially fasqun nikah as well. Does khula count like a single talaq or an irrevocable divorce? Yes, so it does. Khula is when the woman does go out and go to the qadi and seeks to end her marriage. And if it is approved and everything goes through and the husband approves that as well, or agrees to that, yes, it will result and constitute as a irrevocable divorce. What are the responsibilities of a wife to her husband according to Islam? Honestly, that would require a whole book, to publish. But just because the sister or a brother did ask, so I will say, number one, maintaining the household. Number two, guarding the chastity and modesty. And number three, support and companionship. And number four, raising children upon deen, and mutual respect and kindness. And lastly, I will say this because this is something that we are asked as well. Does the wife pay for things as well? Financial requirement. No, she's not obligated to, but if she wishes to do so and help and assist the husband, yes, it would be as a sadaqah for her, she can. What is the time period for iddah? Can a woman go out of home during iddah? Yes, it depends. Under certain situation, yes, she can. The time for iddah is thalathatu quru, or 3 cycles. What are the responsibility and rights does a man have towards his ex-wife after Islamic divorce when it comes to maintenance payments? So the husband, if the talaq did occur, the husband is required to pay for her nafaqah and provide sukna as long as she is in the iddah. Ma zadat fil iddah, he is required to. As the iddah comes to end, he does not have any Islamic obligation to pay for it. Like sometimes we do get these requests that after iddah, the ex-wife in a case requests $500 or $1,000 to be given to her on monthly basis. Just recently we had to deal with that. There is no such thing as that. As for child custody, it all depends where it's taken, in the law of the land, in the court, how that is actually, given. But because we always want them to have an amicable divorce, and we encourage that actually to avoid all that hassle. So we always encourage them what they feel comfortable with. And subhanAllah, we've had cases where it was 50-50 as well. We've had 60-40 as well. We've had 30-70, 70 being with the mother and 30%, custody with the dad, vice versa. There's an interesting question. How do you approach having a conversation with your wife about having a second wife? Knowing she will absolutely not agree with it and will ask for a divorce. SubhanAllah, somebody's very brave. I will just say that. But I will say this, second wife is not for everyone. Understand that very well. We are over here, subhanAllah, emphasizing on the importance of fulfilling the rights of one wife. And subhanAllah, he wants to make it double. And subhanAllah, understand that yes, it sounds amazing, but it's a huge risk at times too. There are certain circumstances, yes, it would be permissible and it would be advised as well. All right, Islamically, yes, he does have permission and rukhsa to do that, but obviously it's not for everyone. We've had to deal with cases like that where they realize that they just made the biggest mistake of their life by even bringing that up. So subhanAllah, understand that, that mithal, hunna libasun lakum. Again, if your garment is stained, work to clean and improve it. Doesn't mean you just throw it away and go get another one. All right, no, subhanAllah, work on the quality of your marriage. There's a lot that you haven't explored. There's a lot that you haven't even, tasted in your marriage. So subhanAllah, so if he already knows that she will ask for a divorce, subhanAllah, so this brother, he needs to be very careful. That's all I'll say. If there were other questions and we weren't able to answer, so I will say that please reach out to us and email. And if there were questions that you would like to ask, but you just didn't feel like asking, I still, again, request you all to please email us, and inshallah, we will reply. Jazakumullahu khair once again for coming out.